Hi, I'm Nick Pawson. You're watching News 24 Live. I'm joined in studio by our Sport24 rugby panel, chief writer Rob Howing and editor Garen Lamley, to preview the big clash at Twickenham this weekend, the Springboks versus England. And then, of course, there are a few other North versus South clashes. Gents, thanks for coming in.
How you doing, Nick?
England announced their team this morning, just one change there, but 5 changes for the Boks, Rob. Changes you expected?
Not really. I didn't think that Heineke Meyer was going to shake the bag as violently as he has. He tends not to be, he prides himself in a way in trying not to be a sort of panicky coach. It's interesting, they've tried to sort of spin the idea that, well, the match 23 hasn't changed, so therefore don't read too much into it. But still, your starting 15 is still quite an important facet. You know, those are the guys who you expect to do the job for sort of at least an hour of an 80-minute match. So, you know, there's still a lot to be read into how a starting team gets shaped. And I'm just a little bit worried that England might be thinking, perhaps there's an element of panic that's got into the Boks after a 14-point defeat to Ireland. And, you know, it might give them just that little bit of an extra sort of incentive, as if they'll lack it anyway, to want to knock over South Africa. So I was a little bit surprised. I would have probably been more keen if the Boks had perhaps just tweaked 2 or 3 positions. 5, I think, is almost like a sort of a start again situation. It means you've got to, you know, there's sort of new combinations in certain respects, having to sort of, you know, re-establish familiarity. The change of the hookers particularly surprised me. I'm not sure I like this rotation between Bismarck du Plessis and Adrian Strauss. For me, Bismarck du Plessis is still the premier hooker, and although Adrian Strauss is an excellent player, don't get me wrong, I just feel that Bismarck is the heavyweight who needed to start a game like England at Twickenham off the back of a defeat, where the Boks need to make a statement early, try and get their noses in front. And for me, Bismarck is a sort of a hard yards guy who, you know, could potentially be influential in just getting the Boks onto the front foot, getting a little bit of momentum going, making them feel better about themselves again. But of course, you know, there's still enough quality in the Springbok team to feel reasonably okay. I think Garen and I might have a little spat about this, but I don't feel too bad. The Boks don't get knocked over twice too often, you know, on the trot. So I'm still reasonably confident about their prospects.
Garen, 5 changes there may be, but the Boks are more or less a much more settled side than the England side are. I mean, you were saying, listing earlier the amount of England players that are injured and unavailable. So in terms of, you know, a consolidated team, we probably got the edge there.
Yeah, we do. Look, I mean, England, just talking about them first, they're missing a whole host of players. It's actually quite amazing if you try and list them all, how many they actually are out this weekend. It's almost like an England B team in a lot of respects, which, you know, South Africa would look at and think, you know, this is not the best team that we're up against. We should perhaps knock them over. We ranked 2nd in the world. There was a chance last week and could even have gone to number 1. But England, obviously at home, you know, this is sort of like not a do or die, but a real key indicator for me for the World Cup next year. You know, we've got England at home at Twickenham, where the final will be played. We'll learn a lot more from this game than I think our match last weekend, even though we lost against Ireland and the upcoming ones against Italy and Wales. When we return home, if we lose this game, you know, the tour for me is a bit of a failure. If we had to win this game and lose the others, you know, I still think we've probably gained more than we've lost out of this tour. But again, agreeing with Rob, when you look at the Springbok team, the 5 changes is unlike a Heineke Meyer of previous tests and years, in that he pretty much sticks to the tried and tested, which, you know, has its pros and cons. The cons, obviously, for me, are that those same players get played into the ground continuously. You know, they just have a couple of weeks off for the Currie Cup, but they play week in, week out. When you look at New Zealand, for example, they've made 14 changes for this week. So I think you either go and make 14 changes or 1 or 2. And it's also fairly ironic that both England and South Africa lost last weekend. The only change England have made for this weekend is an injury force change on the wing. A player who was making his debut last week didn't really do that much. They're not going to lose much by bringing in a new face out on the wing. Whereas South Africa, you've got Handré Pollard. Everyone's talking about he's definitely the future. He's the player we're going to start with at the World Cup. Yet surely you would want him then at number 10 against England at Twickenham. So the fact that Patrick Lambie is starting, Heineke Meyer said 2 years ago he played well. But, you know, a lot has happened in the last 2 years. We've been through Jantjies and Goosen and Mornestein and Pollard, and now apparently Lambie's playing well. You know, I've never ever seen Handré Pollard come off the bench to play any game ever. Under 19, 20 Bulls, I don't think he knows what it is to be an impact player.
I really don't. So I don't know what Heineke Meyer sees in that. It'll be interesting to see what happens on the weekend. I can sort of understand the JP Peterson in for Cornel Hendricks, who didn't play well that last weekend. Peterson adds tremendous experience out on the wing. And the other changes at halfback, I think, Hougaard, again, he only came in because Pienaar was in, before he was injured, who was only there because old Farid Priya was injured. So we're sort of going through the scrum. I was giving everyone a chance. So it doesn't seem like he's settled on key positions at halfback either. So I'm a little bit worried about this weekend. I wouldn't be shocked at all if England win. They don't often lose 2 matches at home either. So, they came within 3 points of beating the All Blacks last weekend. I think they're going to sneak it this weekend. I think South Africa will, have a lot to learn from this match. I can see us going down by a fairly close margin, but by 3 or 4 points at least.